Hello, my name is Jonathan Soul, and welcome to the Nevins Train. That's right, today we begin our profile of the Nevins family name. That would be my grandmother, Martha Elizabeth Nevins, her father and mother, and grandparents and great grandparents. So it's with a great amount of love and respect that we start this profile with my grandmother's father, Ozro Newton Nevins. Hop on board. Here we go. So, as we start this profile, I'd like to recognize some of the resources that I rely on heavily to prepare with these videos. We'll start with my own father's autobiography, A Reflective Life, which records a lot of this information and has access to many of the photos that I'm using. And also relying heavily on my Uncle Bob's tireless work, much of it reflected here in the Nevins and Griffith family reunion document of 2013. Now, in addition to providing a huge amount of genealogy information, contained in this booklet is a summary of the family history that was actually written based on notes by my grandmother's older sister, Aunt Eulalia, and then typewriter written by my great aunt Irma Jean, and then partially edited by my grandmother, who remembered some of the facts slightly differently. So three sisters combined to write the family history. And it's amazing and it's beautiful. And I will scan this and make it available on the drive. So if you want to know how a pioneer family survives the Kansas plains, it's a must read. But we'll get into some of that. So here we go. So let's place Knute Nevins in the family tree. My grandmother's Martha Elizabeth Nevins, and her father was Knute Nevins, and he would marry Mattie Elizabeth Griffith. Knute was born in 1857, and his parents were Michael Rice Nevins, and his mother was Susan Jane Van Camp. All right, let's take a look at a map. So Knute was born in Iowa in 1857. And the family would then, Michael Rice, his father and mother, they would move to Pierce City, Missouri. And Pierce City was actually a thriving railroad hub with lines out west. Look how close it is to Galena, Kansas, where the Solons were actually beginning to settle and build their family. So just not that far away, the Nevins and Griffiths family were also making their way out west. Mattie Griffith would marry Knute in jest because of his wagon and team of horses. But they would then have a land grant claim and move farther out west beyond Wichita to Sawyer, Kansas. And they would be there for 3 years along with Mattie's brother. And then they would get another claim in Royal Township north of Dodge City. This is where they would lose 2 of their children, and we'll get into that sad tragedy. They would move east of Dodge City in Ford, and then in 1911 they would move and live in Dodge City, and I'm going to show you the house that they occupied, and it's a beautiful house right in the middle of Dodge City. Before we get into life in Dodge City, I do want to review their children. Eulalia was born in 1882, actually in Missouri. So she traveled west as a baby with the family. Clarence was born in 1886. At this time, they had moved north of Dodge City on the plains and were working for their 5 years farming the land. In 1888, Ertl was born, and she was only 1 year old when measles outbreak swept through the community, and several people died. Um, and Ertl was one of those that passed away. She passed away in 1889. 2 years later, they had Freddie, and Freddie was left in the responsibility of Knute one day, and he was not 2 years old, in a high chair, and he left the home, and Freddie fell out of the high chair and hit his head, and he did not recover, and he passed away. And this was obviously a great tragedy and a sadness over the family. So sad, in fact, that the the home and the sad memories Maddie couldn't handle, and so they left that home, and that's where they moved back towards Ford, um, and established home there. Um, the two children were buried at the Riddenauer Cemetery, and I'd just like to show you what that cemetery looks like. Here's a picture. Now, I'm an East Coast guy. I've spent the majority of my life in Virginia and North Carolina. And if you haven't been to the plains of Kansas, then you owe it yourself to make a visit and simply take in a horizon line and the sky as beautiful as this. And this is where they were pioneers. Um, and so I'd like to read some lines from the family history, to give you a little bit of an idea of what life was like. The homestead north of Dodge City was virgin territory. Prairie grass abounded. There were few trees, and this meant the birds were few. Coyotes and rabbits were plentiful. By this time, the buffaloes were gone. This section of the country is quite a contrast to our mother. Her days were spent in North Carolina and Missouri, where streams of water, large trees, birds of all varieties, and she loved that type of nature. I can remember her crying when a little tree she was nourishing was torn from the earth by a heavy wind. The decade of the 90s, the 1890s, were terrible years. The wind blew, little rain fell, the grasshoppers came and destroyed the crops. There was a huge prairie fire. One winter, there was a terrible blizzard. It was impossible for Dad to drive home in the wagon. Grandmother had returned back to her place near Sears. There was little to burn for heating. Clarence, who was 9 years old, looked after the stock. Eulalia kept the fire going and looked after Mother and Arthur. It took a couple of days before Dad could drive the 10 miles. He nearly froze to death. It was a very bad situation. All survived, and Eulalia writes, "I don't know how we did it." But they would survive the 90s, the 1890s. After the loss of Freddie in 1893, Arthur was born in 1895, Ralph in 1896, Irma in 1899, and my grandmother, Martha, in 1904. Well, not only was Knute Nevins a pioneer and a farmer, but a good businessman. And he loved to trade. And so he worked the land for many years, crops and livestock. But in 1911, there was an opportunity to move the family into Dodge City. One of the reasons was so the children could attend high school. But also there was the hardware store. And so Knute Nevins purchased the hardware store and would become a leader in the town of Dodge City. Well, Knute Nevins and his family thrived in Dodge City. His large family, growing from children to young adults, would all become leaders in their own way. Knute himself would become commissioner of streets and responsible for the first paved street in Dodge City. His wife, Maddie, would also excel as a leader in the church and in the community. And over the years, they simply loved watching Dodge City grow and mature from a scruffy Western town into a respectable city. Knute's wife, Maddie, would pass away suddenly in 1923, and I look forward to doing a profile in our next video of this amazing woman. The next several years, Knute's body would begin to fail on him, and his hard work on the fields of Kansas would eventually take their toll. He said he liked to work from can see to can't see, and his funeral was held at 6 p.m. because that's when he would go home to his family. I'm putting up here is his obituary. He was another old timer of Dodge City, and truly a respected man in all measures. So that is the profile of Knute Nevins. What a man, what a guy. Until next time on the Soul Train. Oops, the Nevins train. See you next time.
State of Arkansas, where my great-grandpa met my great-grandma. They drink apple cider and they get on a jag, and they dance all night to the salty dog rag. They play an old fiddle like you never heard before. They play the only tune that they ever did know. It's a ragtime ditty and the rhythm don't drag. Now here's the way you dance to the salty dog rag.